We wanted to start with those Supreme Court rulings, the very latest. So to give you a kind of top-line scoreboard of some of the major decisions that happened here, we've got some graphics from the New York Times about what some of the key rulings here were and how they broke down partisan lines or whether there was more overwhelming majority. Let's put the first one up on the screen. This one we did have a chance to talk about with our great panel. Thank you guys so much for the feedback on that. I thought both of those gentlemen really offered a lot of insight and represented their views well. Affirmative action, the use of race in college admissions, struck down 6-3. So this was a partisan vote. Let's go ahead and put the next one up on the screen in terms of rulings. This one we're going to get into more. So President Biden's student loan debt cancellation program also struck down 6-3. So again, along those ideological or partisan lines. Let's put the next one up on the screen. This is another one we'll talk about today. So it has to do with a creator, business owner who was requested maybe to create a website for a gay couple and did not want to do it because she said it violated her beliefs as a Christian. This one also was a partisan decision, 6-3. And let's put this last one up on the screen. This was an interesting one. You had state legislatures and federal elections. This was the Independent State Legislature Theory. A lot of concerns here that if the court upheld this idea of the independent state legislature, this could be used next time around if Trump tries to steal the election again, because this was some of the rationale that went into the last attempt to steal the election. So you had some liberals joining with conservatives here to say, no, we're not going in that direction, and also to maintain the power of the judiciary over state and federal elections. So an interesting one there. But let's go ahead and dive into this student debt decision. Put this next element up on the screen that I just mentioned. So as you guys recall, Joe Biden issued an executive order to cancel $10,000 to $20,000 in student loan debt for people below a certain income threshold. Major Biden initiative, something that was promised on the campaign trail, something that was really pushed for by activists, now struck down 6-3 along partisan ideological lines here. So the details within this piece, they talk about how the court rejected the thinking because the language was not specific enough. You had Chief Justice John Roberts writing for the majority, saying that the court's precedent, quote, requires that Congress speak clearly before a department secretary can unilaterally alter large sections of the American economy. The context here is student loan repayments are actually set to begin again at the end of August. That was part of that debt ceiling deal that was struck with Kevin McCarthy after having been put on pause during the COVID-19 pandemic. First payments not due, though, until October. So at a moment when student loan payments are about to restart, and when obviously you still have this massive amount of debt hanging over many former college and current college students, this plan has been struck down. Emily, the Biden administration has already responded. They have a new plan in place. This is kind of the Plan B approach, so to speak. Put this up on the screen. So as I mentioned before, they had chosen to use the HEROES Act, which was this pandemic-era legislation. It was always a little perplexing to me that they went in that direction. But as I mentioned before, they thought, all right, since Trump did it, maybe this is the easiest way to sneak one by the court. Now they're saying, all right, we're going to try it again. We're going to use the Higher Education Act of 1965. The language there is a little more clear. The act says that they can compromise, waive, or release student loans. So it's fairly direct. It says the education secretary has the authority to do that. The Higher Education Act of 1965 has been used in the past to cancel some student loan debt, although admittedly not as sweeping a program as what the Biden administration is pushing here. In addition, he has also announced a 12-month grace period to help borrowers who might struggle after payments restart. There's some indication that there are quite a number of student loan debt holders who will have trouble making their payments. So there is a 12-month grace period. However, interest will continue to accrue. It will resume in September. So whether or not you are making payments, that interest is going to continue to mount. And there's another piece of this that I'll get into in a moment that's a little bit complicated, but basically the bottom line is for this Higher Education Act, the new direction to go through, it's going to be a lengthy process that is going to push this out almost certainly beyond 2024 and beyond the next election.
And that's exactly what Biden seemed to be struggling with. His quote on this was, he said basically, I think using the Higher Education Act is going to take longer than the original plan, but, quote, in my view, it's the best path that remains to providing as many borrowers borrowers as possible with debt relief. Now, the David Dayen piece that we had from Prospect up on the screen just a moment ago is fascinating because he makes a very persuasive case that this was always the way the Biden administration should have gone. And when you have people whose lives are on the line, and this is something I think conservatives get wrong a lot. They don't recognize how consequential the student loans are. They say, well, people made this decision, and they can deal with the consequences of it. Well, if you want people to buy homes and start families and join the middle class and be, members of their communities constructively, you don't want them to be saddled with tens of thousands of dollars of debt just to get their ticket into the middle class.
Right.
And so this is obviously hugely consequential, and Biden has left these people in the lurch for years at this point and will continue to be years in the future. So not only, I think, is that election date important for Joe Biden, but it's just another indication of how, I think, silly sometimes this administration has been when approaching these questions.
I never understood why they went in the direction of the HEROES Act. Their justification to make the case that they would make is that it would be quicker, and that since Trump had used it to justify some student loan debt relief, perhaps the court would look more favorably upon it. I've always thought that was a little bit foolish because, I view the court as basically like a partisan operation. To the extent that they try to balance their decisions, it's because Chief Justice John Roberts is afraid of their getting more wind in the sails of something like court packing and, completely undermining legitimacy of the court. So I find it sort of precious when people go in and analyze, was it correctly decided based on the Constitution? Because to me, the idea that they're just calling legal balls and strikes here is completely farcical. But, there's some real questions, I think, about how much Biden actually wants the student loan debt to be canceled. Based on his history, his ideological history, I mean, this is dyed-in-the-wool neoliberal. Debt cancellation, not really something that neoliberals have historically been on board with. He was kind of dragged kicking and screaming to this. The only reason he made this promise on the campaign trail is because he was facing pressure from Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and others to do something. His plan was always the least of the crew in the 2020 primary, but he did make a really clear promise here. And then, even once he gets into office, this is something he had the unilateral ability to effectuate and still dragged his feet. Really reportedly was very reluctant to undergo any of this debt cancellation, decides to do it using the HEROES Act for, the administration justifications that you would give. But even with the direction that they're going in now, David Dayen points this out in his piece, they want to issue it as a rule. And part of the reason why apparently they have to do that is because they want to do all this complicated means testing and stuff. Yeah. And so they feel like it may be on stronger legal footing. This is their justification if you go through the rulemaking process. Now that requires a public comment period. It requires this negotiated rulemaking period. It takes a lot of time. There is another way they could do it as an order, but it would be faster, but perhaps on less solid legal footing is the analysis. Now, again, I think it's sort of silly to really imagine that the Supreme Court is just looking at this and calling them balls and strikes and analyzing, this is on stronger legal footing and this is on weaker ground. So in my opinion, they should push the envelope, issue an order, cancel the debt as quickly as they possibly can. But if you want to be a little bit conspiratorial or, I guess a little bit cynical about this, you could also say, well, it's kind of convenient for them that this pushes it out past the next election when this is a really critical issue for so many voters, very motivating for so many voters who feel direct, tangible material pressure and possible material benefit from this. So if you have this as a live issue going into the election, you can see how that might be appealing to them politically above and beyond their rationalizations about, this is the best way legally forward.
And they can continue to blame the court. They can continue to say, Joe Biden, or if you're Joe Biden, did everything in my power to give you this relief. And yet, the conservative Supreme Court blocked it. So right now what I'm doing is everything else that's in my power. I'm working really hard on it. And you can continue to make that pitch, continue to make this issue part of that. Listen, I think what depresses me most about all of that is, one of the reasons I oppose categorical relief or relief in ways like this is because the system is a joke. I mean, it is the neoliberal idea that you can take, that college education, it's your ticket to the middle class, everything's going to be okay. That was a lie. It was a lie from our politicians, the entire political class, the media. It was a lie from the culture for years and years and years. And college education has just gotten more expensive, so there's no incentives to take down the cost of it. And for me, what's really depressing about that is nobody even has the will. Like, not only, it's interesting because the Biden administration sort of halfway approach, like, we're not extreme, but we're also, not, super, like, we're not that liberal, but we're also going to do stuff for our activist base. We're also listening to Bernie, et cetera, et cetera. It's the worst of both worlds. Like, go all in or go all out. Be honest with voters. Say, we're not actually going to do this, or, yeah, we're going to do it, and you're going to live with it. And a lot of people are going to like it, and a lot of people are going to hate it. But this, like, split the baby approach by Biden, which he does on not just this issue, but other issues, is the worst of both worlds, because now people's personal livelihoods, their material reality is in the lurch and will continue to be in the lurch for electoral reasons for years to come.
I think those are really important points, and I think all of that is fair. I mean, the reason I come down in a different place than you do and then Saagar does on the actual possibility of debt relief is because, listen, I would love it if there was broader reform on the table. I would love it if there was free public college and trade school on the table. There's not. So at least if there's, a little bit of relief that's on the table for a lot of people that would make a huge difference in their lives, I'm like, all right, let's do that, because that's the best we can get right now. But the big picture here is a story of institutional failure. I mean, you have a White House that sort of bungled the direction of this from the beginning, that dragged their feet, that could have provided a lot more relief. So you've got that. You've got Congress is really the place where you should have broader legislation to deal with the fact that college education costs continue to skyrocket, that you even have a thing that is student debt, and that it is crushing for multiple generations, sets them back in terms of families, which, you're talking about marriage today, in terms of being able to buy a house, in terms of being able to start a business and be entrepreneurs, if that's the direction that they want to go in. So this absolute crushing level of debt, that's something Congress should be able to deal with. That's the appropriate place to really formulate a comprehensive solution. No one has any expectation that that's coming anytime soon. And then you have a court that has, its own massive corruption issues and total loss of credibility, that is not interested in calling bells and strikes, that is interested in advancing their own ideological agenda. So you just have, like, every branch of government kind of failures all around. And I think that's the big picture of student loan debt relief. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.